I thought the worst part of Christmas would be watching my husband leave me, but I was wrong. The worst part was realizing he had planned it all along. The lights on our Christmas tree blinked softly in the corner of the living room, casting warm golden reflections across the glass ornaments I had spent hours carefully hanging just 2 nights before. The scent of cinnamon candles mixed with roasted turkey still lingered in the air, and quiet jazz Christmas music played from the speakers, filling the house with a calm that now felt almost cruel. I stood at the edge of the dining table, my fingers lightly gripping the back of a chair, trying to steady myself as I looked around at the people I loved, our closest friends, a few family members, and right across from me my husband Ethan Carter. He looked composed, almost too composed, his dark suit perfectly pressed as if this were a business meeting instead of Christmas dinner. For a brief moment, I thought maybe things were finally going to be okay between us. The past few weeks had been distant. Late nights, short answers, the kind of silence that feels louder than any argument. But he had shown up tonight, sat beside me, even smiled when guests arrived. I had taken that as a sign. I had wanted it to be a sign. "Rachel," Ethan said suddenly, his voice cutting cleanly through the room. The soft chatter faded. Forks paused midair. I turned toward him, forcing a small smile, expecting maybe a toast, something polite, something normal. Instead, he reached down beside his chair and lifted a thin leather folder, placing it gently on the table in front of me. The sound it made against the wood was soft, but it echoed in my chest like something much heavier. "I think it's time we stop pretending," he continued, his tone calm, almost rehearsed. A faint ringing filled my ears as I stared at the folder, not yet opening it, not yet understanding, or maybe not wanting to. My heart began to pound, slow at first, then faster, each beat heavier than the last. Around me I could feel eyes shifting, confusion spreading across faces, the room holding its breath. I finally reached forward, my fingers trembling just enough that I noticed it. When I opened the folder, the words were unmistakable. "Divorce papers." My name printed neatly beside his. The air seemed to vanish from the room. For a second I couldn't hear anything. Not the music, not the quiet gasps, not even my own breathing. Just silence, thick and suffocating. I looked up at Ethan, searching his face for something, regret, hesitation, anything that told me this wasn't real. But all I found was a calm, distant expression I barely recognized anymore. "I didn't want to do this like this," he said, though his voice carried no apology. "But it's better if everyone hears it at once." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Someone set down a glass too quickly. The warmth of Christmas, the lights, the laughter, the sense of togetherness, felt like a stage set that had just been ripped apart in front of me. And then, almost without thinking, my eyes moved across the table and landed on Lauren Mitchell, my best friend. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't confused. She was watching Ethan. Quietly. Carefully. Like she had been waiting for this moment. No one moved at first. It was as if the entire room had been frozen in place, like one of those snow globes sitting on the shelf behind me, shaken just enough to make everything inside swirl but not enough for it to settle. The soft music continued playing in the background, a slow instrumental version of a Christmas song that suddenly felt completely out of place. I became aware of the smallest details in a way I never had before, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the quiet hum of the heater, the way the candle flames flickered as if reacting to something none of us could see. My hands were still resting on the edge of the table, but I could not feel the wood beneath my fingers anymore. It was like my body had gone numb, except for my chest, where my heart was beating so hard it almost hurt. I looked down at the papers again, scanning the lines as if they might change if I read them slowly enough, carefully enough, but they did not. Every word was clear, final, deliberate. This was not something written in anger or in the middle of an argument. This had been planned. Carefully. Quietly. Over time. "Ethan," I finally said, my voice softer than I expected, almost unrecognizable to my own ears. "What is this?" Was a pointless question. We both knew exactly what it was, but saying anything else felt impossible. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair as if he had just completed something difficult, something he had been preparing himself to do. "It is what it looks like, Rachel," he replied. His tone remained steady, controlled, almost detached. Not cruel. Not loud. And somehow that made it worse. A few people shifted in their seats. I heard someone clear their throat. Across the table, one of our friends avoided eye contact entirely, staring down at their plate as if the food had suddenly become the most important thing in the world. No one spoke. No one interrupted. The silence felt heavy, like something pressing down on all of us. I swallowed, forcing myself to breathe. "You are doing this now?" I asked, glancing around the room at the decorations, at the gifts still wrapped under the tree, at the people who had come here expecting warmth and celebration. On Christmas. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not regret, not quite discomfort, just a brief hesitation that disappeared almost as quickly as it came. "There is never a perfect time," he said. And I did not want to drag this out any longer. Drag this out. The words echoed in my mind, as if our marriage was nothing more than an inconvenience he had been waiting to resolve. My chest tightened, but I refused to let my voice break. Not here. Not in front of everyone. "So this is it?" I asked quietly. "You bring a legal document to dinner and expect me to sign it in front of our friends?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached for his glass, took a small sip, then set it down with careful precision. Everything he did felt measured, intentional, like he had rehearsed this moment more times than I could count. "I think it is better to be honest," he said finally. "For everyone." Honest. The word felt almost ironic, because as I looked at him, at the calm confidence in his posture, at the way he seemed completely in control of the narrative unfolding in front of us, something inside me shifted. A quiet, unsettling realization began to form, one that made the air feel colder despite the warmth of the room. This was not just a conversation. This was a performance. And I was the only one who had not been given the script. Slowly, I lifted my gaze again, scanning the faces around the table, searching for something, anything that felt real, that felt grounded. And then I saw her again. Lauren had not touched her food. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, her posture straight, her eyes fixed not on me, but on Ethan. There was no panic in her expression. No confusión. Just a quiet focus, like someone watching a story unfold exactly the way they expected it to. And in that moment, a single thought crossed my mind, sharp and sudden. Lauren knew something. The thought did not come from nowhere. It came from the past few weeks, from small moments I had ignored at the time because they did not fit the version of my life I wanted to believe in. I swallowed slowly, forcing my breathing to stay even as my mind began replaying everything I had pushed aside. Started about a month ago, just after Thanksgiving. Ethan had begun coming home later than usual, always with a simple explanation: long meetings, unexpected deadlines, clients who needed last-minute attention. First, I believed him. I had always believed him. That was what marriage meant to me. Trust without needing proof. But then there were the little things. The way he started turning his phone face down whenever he set it on the table. The way he would step out of the room to take certain calls, lowering his voice just enough that I could not make out the words. The way his answers became shorter, more careful, like he was choosing each one instead of speaking naturally. I remember one night in particular. It was cold outside, one of those early December evenings where the air feels sharper than usual. I had made dinner, something simple, roasted chicken and vegetables, nothing fancy. We sat across from each other just like we always did, but the silence between us felt different. Not comfortable. Not familiar. Just empty. I had asked him if everything was okay, if something was wrong, and he had smiled in that same calm way I was seeing now and said, "I am just tired, Rachel. Work has been a lot." And I had nodded. I had accepted it, because it was easier than questioning the man I had built my life with. But the feeling never really went away. It stayed quiet and persistent, like something just under the surface. And then there was Lauren. I glanced at her again across the table, her expression still composed, still watching. A few days ago, she had stopped by unexpectedly. She said she was in the neighborhood, said she wanted to check on me. We sat in the living room, the Christmas tree already up, lights glowing softly just like they were now. She had asked me questions that felt simple at the time. How things were with Ethan, if I had noticed anything different, if everything felt normal. I had laughed it off, told her marriage had its ups and downs, that we were just going through a busy season. She did not argue with me. She did not push. But I remember the way she looked at me, like she was trying to decide whether to say something or stay quiet. She chose silence. At least that is what I thought back then. Now, sitting at this table with divorce papers in front of me and Ethan acting like this moment had been carefully planned, that memory felt completely different. It did not feel like concern anymore. It felt like hesitation. Like she knew something she was not ready to say yet. My fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the table as the realization settled deeper. This was not sudden. This was not a decision Ethan made today or even this week. This had been building for a long time. And somehow, in ways I did not yet understand, Lauren had been part of that timeline. I lifted my eyes from the table again, meeting hers directly this time, searching for any sign, any confirmation of what I was starting to piece together. She did not look away. And that was when I knew. Whatever was happening here tonight, she had been expecting it. The silence stretched just a little too long, and that was when Ethan leaned forward again, resting his forearms lightly on the table as if he were about to explain something reasonable, something logical, something that would make all of this feel justified. "I know this is not easy to hear," he said, his voice steady, almost measured. "But I think we both know this has not been working for a while." His words landed carefully, like he had chosen each one in advance, like he had practiced this conversation in his head until it sounded exactly the way he wanted it to. I felt something tighten in my chest, not just pain but something sharper, something closer to disbelief. "We both know," I repeated quietly, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. My voice did not rise, but it carried enough weight that a few heads turned toward me again. Ethan nodded slightly, as if confirming a simple fact. "You have felt it too," he continued. "The distance. The tension. The way we have been drifting apart." Drifting apart. He said it like it was mutual, like we had both been standing on opposite sides watching the same thing happen. But that was not how it felt to me. Not even close. I shook my head slowly, the movement almost automatic. "No," I said, my voice still calm but firmer now. "I felt you pulling away. That is not the same thing." The room shifted again. A subtle change in the air as people began to sense that this was not going to stay quiet. Ethan's jaw tightened for just a second before he relaxed it again, maintaining that same composed expression. "Rachel," he said, lowering his voice slightly as if trying to keep things contained, "I am not here to argue. I am trying to handle this respectfully." Respectfully. The word echoed in my mind, and for the first time since he placed those papers in front of me, something inside me pushed back against the numbness. Respect would have been a conversation. Respect would have been honesty weeks ago, not a public announcement in the middle of Christmas dinner. I glanced around the table again at the faces watching us, at the discomfort they were trying to hide, at the way no one seemed to know where to look. "You call this respectful?" I asked, gesturing lightly toward the papers, toward the room, toward everything that had just happened. "You bring legal documents to a holiday dinner, and expect me to sit here and accept it like it is normal?" Ethan exhaled again, slower this time, as if he had anticipated this reaction and was prepared for it. "I did not want to do this privately and then have to explain it over and over again," he said. "This way everything is clear. No confusión. No rumors. No confusión." The irony was almost unbearable, because if anything this moment was filled with confusion, just not for him. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly how this would unfold. And suddenly the realization from moments earlier came back stronger, sharper, impossible to ignore. This was not just about ending a marriage. This was about controlling the story. About shaping how everyone in this room would remember this night. I felt my fingers curl slightly against the table as I looked at him, really looked at him, not as the man I married but as the man sitting in front of me now. And for the first time I noticed something I had missed before. The confidence in his posture was not just calmness. It was certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from believing you have already won. My gaze shifted again, almost instinctively, back to Lauren. She had not spoken yet. Not once. But her attention had not wavered. She was still watching Ethan, still studying him, her expression unreadable but far from passive. And then just for a brief second I saw it. The smallest change. A quiet decision settling into place behind her eyes. She straightened slightly in her chair, her hands no longer resting loosely but moving with purpose. And in that moment, before she even said a word, I felt it. Whatever Ethan thought he had control over was about to change. Lauren did not rush. That was the first thing I noticed. While the tension in the room tightened, while every second felt stretched thin and fragile, she moved with a kind of quiet control that stood in complete contrast to everything else unfolding around us. She reached down beside her chair, her movements smooth and deliberate, and picked up her purse. The soft sound of the zipper opening cut through the silence more sharply than it should have. No one spoke. No one interrupted. It was as if the entire room had shifted its focus without realizing it, drawn toward her without knowing why. Ethan's attention followed the sound as well, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in fear, not yet, but in curiosity. He was still confident, still certain. He still believed he understood every part of this moment. Lauren placed her purse on her lap and reached inside, her gaze steady, her expression calm in a way that felt almost unsettling now. She did not look at me. She did not look at anyone else. Her eyes stayed on Ethan, and then she pulled it out. A simple envelope. Plain. Unmarked. Nothing about it looked dramatic or important at first glance, but the way she held it made it feel heavier than it should have been. She stood slowly, her chair making a soft sound against the floor, and for the first time since this all began, someone else broke the stillness. "Before you go any further," she said, her voice clear but not raised, steady enough that every single person in the room could hear her without effort, "I think you should take a look at this." Ethan's expression shifted just slightly, not enough for most people to notice, but I saw it. That brief flicker of something uncertain, something he had not planned for. He leaned back in his chair again, studying her now, reassessing. "Lauren," he said, his tone still controlled but no longer entirely relaxed, "this really is not the time." She did not react to his dismissal. She did not sit back down. Instead, she took a single step forward and placed the envelope on the table in front of him, right next to the papers he had brought. The contrast was almost symbolic. His neatly prepared documents on one side, her quiet interruption on the other. "Actually," she replied calmly, "this is exactly the time." The room felt even quieter now, if that was possible. I could hear my own breathing again, shallow but steady, as I watched the exchange unfold. Ethan's gaze dropped briefly to the envelope, then lifted back to Lauren's face, searching, calculating. He was trying to understand what this was, what it meant, how it fit into the version of events he had already constructed in his mind. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked, a hint of impatience creeping into his voice for the first time. Lauren did not answer immediately. Instead, she folded her hands lightly in front of her, her posture relaxed, almost patient. "Something you should have expected," she said. The words landed differently than everything else that had been said tonight. Not emotional. Not reactive. Just precise. And for the first time since he walked in with that folder, Ethan did not respond right away. His confidence did not disappear, but it shifted, just enough to create a crack in the surface. My eyes moved between them, my mind racing, trying to connect pieces that still did not fully make sense. Lauren had known something. That much was clear now. But what she had in that envelope, and why she had chosen this exact moment to reveal it, that was still hidden. Slowly, Ethan reached forward, his fingers brushing against the edge of the envelope. The movement was subtle, almost casual, but there was something different in it now. Less certainty. More caution. And as his hand closed around it, I felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation rise in my chest. Not relief. Not yet. But something close to it. Because for the first time since this night began, it no longer felt like I was the only one being tested. For a moment, Ethan did not move. His fingers rested on the envelope, but he did not open it yet, as if some part of him was weighing whether he even should. The confidence he had walked in with had not disappeared, but it was no longer effortless. It had become something he had to hold on to, something he had to maintain. "You are being dramatic," he said finally, his voice lower now, more controlled, like he was trying to bring the situation back into his hands. Lauren did not react. Not to the tone, not to the words. She simply tilted her head slightly, her eyes still locked on his. "Open it," she said. Just 2 words. No explanation. No emotion. But there was something in the way she said it that made the room feel even smaller, even tighter. Ethan let out a short breath through his nose, almost like a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. "This is not necessary," he replied, his hand still on the envelope but not moving. "Whatever you think this is, it does not change anything." I felt my pulse quicken again, not from fear this time but from anticipation. Because for the first time tonight, Ethan was hesitating. And he was trying to hide it. Lauren took a slow step closer to the table, closing the small distance between them. "That is exactly why you should open it," she said. "If it changes nothing, then you have nothing to worry about." The logic was simple, clean, impossible to dismiss without drawing more attention. A few people at the table shifted again, the tension now no longer centered only on me, but spreading outward, pulling everyone into it. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. His fingers pressed more firmly against the envelope, and then finally he picked it up. The sound of the paper sliding against the table was quiet, but it echoed just the same. He turned it over once, as if expecting to find something written on it, some clue, some warning, but there was nothing. Just a plain surface. Whatever was inside was meant to be the surprise. Slowly, deliberately, he slid his finger under the flap and opened it. No one spoke. No one even shifted in their seat. It felt like the entire room had leaned forward without moving. He reached inside and pulled out a small stack of papers. At first, his expression did not change. He glanced at the top page, scanning quickly, like someone reviewing something unimportant. But then something shifted. It was subtle. So subtle that if I had not been watching him so closely, I might have missed it. His eyes paused, just for a second longer than before. Then they moved again, slower this time. More carefully. The calm, controlled rhythm he had maintained all night began to break. Not completely, but enough to create a visible crack. He turned the page. Then another. His posture straightened slightly, his shoulders no longer as relaxed as they had been. The certainty that had filled his presence earlier was no longer as solid. I could see it now, the way his fingers tightened just a fraction, the way his breathing changed, barely noticeable but real. "What is it?" someone asked quietly from the other side of the table, unable to hold the silence any longer. Ethan did not answer. He did not even look up. He kept reading. Lauren remained still, her expression unchanged, her focus unwavering. She did not need to say anything else. Whatever was inside that envelope was speaking for her. I felt my own breath catch as I tried to see what he was seeing, but from where I stood, all I could make out were lines of text, official-looking, structured, deliberate. Not random. Not emotional. Something planned. Something prepared. Finally, Ethan lowered the papers. Slightly, just enough that I could see his face clearly again. And in that moment everything shifted. The man who had walked into this room with complete control, with a plan, with certainty written into every movement, did not look the same anymore. He did not look panicked. Not yet. But he no longer looked certain either. And that was when I understood something important. Whatever was in that envelope, it was not just unexpected. It was dangerous to him. The shift in Ethan's expression did not go unnoticed. It was small, controlled, but it was there, and once it appeared, it could not be hidden again. He tried to recover quickly, straightening the stack of papers in his hand as if organizing them would somehow restore his composure, but the moment had already slipped. "This does not prove anything," he said, his voice firmer now, a little sharper than before, as if he needed to push back before anyone else could react. Lauren did not move. She did not interrupt. She simply watched him with that same steady focus, as if she had been waiting for those exact words. "Then explain it," she replied calmly. "No accusation." No raised voice. Just a simple request that carried more weight than anything louder could have. Ethan's eyes flicked up from the papers to meet hers, and for the first time, there was something defensive in his gaze. Not fear. Not panic. But a clear awareness that the ground beneath him was no longer as solid as he had believed. "It is out of context," he said quickly. "You are twisting things you do not understand." The response came too fast. Too prepared. Like he had already decided what he would say if something like this ever came up, even if he had not expected it tonight. I felt my breath catch slightly as I watched him, the pieces in my mind starting to align in ways that made my chest feel tight again, but not from confusion this time. From clarity. Lauren tilted her head just a fraction, her expression unchanged. Out of context, she repeated softly. That is interesting. Because these are direct copies of your messages. Your account. Your name. Your words. A ripple moved through the room, subtle but unmistakable. People were no longer just uncomfortable. They were paying attention. Really paying attention. Ethan's grip on the papers tightened, the edges bending slightly under the pressure of his fingers. You should not have access to any of this, he said, his tone dropping lower, more controlled again, but no longer calm in the same way it had been earlier. Lauren let out a small, quiet breath, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. You are right, she said. I should not have. But you made a mistake. The word hung in the air, simple and sharp. A mistake. Ethan did not respond immediately. He was thinking now, calculating, trying to find a way back into control, but every second of silence only made the situation heavier. I could feel it, the shift in the room, the way attention had fully turned, the way people were no longer looking at me with sympathy, but at him with growing curiosity. Tell them, Lauren continued, her voice still steady, still controlled, but now carrying a quiet authority that had not been there before. Tell them why you have been moving money out of your joint accounts for the past 6 weeks. The words landed like a crack through the surface of everything Ethan had built tonight. My heart skipped, the meaning hitting me a second later, sharp and undeniable. Moving money. 6 weeks. My eyes snapped back to Ethan, searching his face, searching for denial, for explanation, for anything that could undo what I had just heard. But his silence said more than any words could have. And maybe, Lauren added, her gaze unwavering, you should also explain why you plan to file those papers right after transferring the last amount. The room felt colder now, despite the warmth of the lights and the soft glow of the tree. The story Ethan had been trying to control was unraveling thread by thread, right in front of everyone. He had come here expecting to define the narrative. Instead, he was now being forced to defend it. I felt my fingers slowly release their grip on the table as a different kind of realization settled over me. This was not just about a marriage ending. This was about something else entirely. Something calculated. Something intentional. And whatever Ethan had planned had just been exposed. The words lingered in the air, heavier than anything that had been said before, and for the first time that night, Ethan did not try to immediately take control of the conversation. His silence was no longer strategic. It was forced. His eyes shifted briefly around the room, as if he was measuring how much had already been understood, how much damage had already been done. No one looked away now. The hesitation, the cracks in his composure, the way he held those papers a little too tightly, it was all visible. And people were noticing. I felt something inside me change, not all at once but steadily, like a slow shift in weight. The confusion that had filled me earlier began to fade, replaced by something clearer, something sharper. I looked at him again, really looked this time, and the image I had held of him for years no longer matched the man sitting in front of me. Is it true? I asked quietly. My voice did not shake. It did not break. It simply existed, calm and direct, cutting through the silence that had taken over the room. Ethan turned toward me, and for a brief second, I saw something I had not seen before. Not confidence. Not control. Just calculation. Rachel, this is not what it looks like, he said, the words slower now, more careful. The same phrase people use when they know exactly what it looks like. I held his gaze, not blinking, not looking away. Then tell me what it is, I replied. Because from where I am standing, it looks like you planned this. The room felt still again, but not the same kind of stillness as before. This one was different. This one was waiting. Ethan exhaled, shifting slightly in his chair, as if trying to find a more comfortable position, but there was no comfort left in this moment for him. I was organizing things, he said. Preparing. That does not mean what you think it means. Preparing. The word echoed in my mind, but now it did not confuse me. Clarified everything. I let out a small breath, not quite a laugh, not quite disbelief, just something in between. You mean you were making sure everything was already out of reach before handing me those papers? I said, still calm, still steady. A few people at the table shifted again, the tension no longer hidden, no longer something they could pretend not to hear. Ethan's expression hardened slightly, the calm mask starting to crack in a different way now. "You are taking this too far," he said. "You do not understand how these things work." That was when something inside me settled completely. The last piece, the last doubt, it disappeared. Because I did understand. Maybe not the details, maybe not every step he had taken, but I understood the intention. And that was enough. I straightened slightly, my hands no longer gripping the table, my posture no longer defensive. "No," I said quietly. "I understand exactly enough." The words were not loud, but they carried. They held. And for the first time that night, I was not reacting to him. I was responding with clarity. My eyes moved briefly to Lauren, and for a second, something unspoken passed between us. Not surprise. Not confusion. Just acknowledgement. She had not stepped in to save me. She had stepped in to reveal the truth. And now it was mine to face. I looked back at Ethan, and this time there was no hesitation left in me. "You did not just come here to end a marriage," I said slowly. "You came here to make sure I had nothing left when you did." The sentence landed in the center of the room. Quiet but undeniable. Ethan did not answer. He could not. Because the control he had walked in with was gone. And the story he had tried to tell no longer belonged to him. No one spoke after that. The silence that followed was no longer tense or uncertain. It was final. The kind of silence that comes when something has been fully revealed, when there is nothing left to question, nothing left to misunderstand. Ethan sat there, the papers still in his hand, but they no longer held the same weight they had just minutes ago. The control he had tried to build into this moment had slipped away completely, and now he was left holding something that no longer protected him. I watched him for a second longer, not with anger, not even with sadness the way I expected, but with a strange clarity I had never felt before. It was as if everything that had been blurred, everything I had tried to ignore or explain away, had finally come into focus all at once. I did not feel small anymore. I did not feel humiliated. I felt aware. Slowly I reached forward and closed the folder he had placed in front of me earlier. The sound was soft, but it carried through the room just the same. Every eye followed the movement, waiting, watching, but this time they were not watching him. They were watching me. "You know what is strange?" I said quietly, my voice steady, grounded in a way it had not been at the beginning of the night. "A few hours ago, I thought this dinner was going to save something." I let out a small breath, not quite a laugh, but close enough to carry the weight of what I meant. I thought if we could just sit down, talk, be around people who cared about us, maybe things would make sense again. I shook my head slightly, the realization settling deeper with each word. But now I understand something I did not want to see before. Ethan did not interrupt. He did not try to regain control again. He simply watched, and for the first time he was the one reacting instead of directing. I met his eyes one last time, not searching anymore, not hoping for anything from him. "You did not lose me tonight," I said. "You made sure I saw exactly who you are." The words were not loud, but they did not need to be. They landed exactly where they needed to. I glanced briefly at the people around the table, at the way their expressions had changed, the discomfort replaced by something else now, something closer to understanding. Then my gaze moved to Lauren. She still stood there, calm, steady, her presence no longer just supportive but significant. She had not tried to speak for me. She had simply made sure the truth had a place to stand. And that was enough. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of everything she had done without saying it out loud. Then I stepped back from the table. The room felt different now. Not lighter, not easier, but clearer. The decorations, the lights, the music, they were still there. But they no longer felt like part of a story I was trapped in. They were just part of a moment I had moved through. "I am not signing anything tonight," I said calmly, my attention returning to Ethan, not as a challenge but as a statement. "Not like this. Not under something you tried to control." He opened his mouth slightly, as if he wanted to respond, but no words came out, because there was nothing left for him to define. I turned away then, not